I'm sitting in my old rocking chair, the one with the squeak that's been driving me nuts for years, staring at a cold cup of Folgers on the coffee table. The TV's humming in the background, some late-night infomercial about miracle mops, but I'm not listening. My mind's stuck on Thanksgiving 2 years ago, the night my daughter Karen looked me dead in the eye and called me worthless. Right there in my own dining room, with the turkey half-carved and her kids, my grandkids fidgeting with their mashed potatoes. Her words hit like a freight train, and I can still feel the bruise. I'm 58 now, living in a modest split level. In Akron, Ohio, the kind of place where the neighbors mow their lawns every Saturday and gossip about whose kid got arrested. My name's Tom Bennett, and I've spent my life grinding, raising Karen alone after her mom Linda walked out when Karen was 6. Back then, it was just me and her, eating SpaghettiOs out of a can. Me working double shifts at the steel mill to keep the lights on. I wasn't perfect, hell. I was barely present some days, but I gave her everything I had. Piano lessons, new sneakers for school, even a beat-up Corolla when she turned 16. All for her to stand there, 30 years later, in my own house, and spit that word at me, worthless. That night, the air was thick with the smell of gravy and tension. Karen was 35. Married to Greg, a slick car salesman with a smile I never trusted. Her kids, Emma and Jake, were 12 and 10. Good kids who still hugged me like I was somebody. We were all crammed around my wobbly dining table, the one I'd bought at a yard sale for $20. Karen had been drinking wine too much, as usual, and started in on me about money. "Dad, you're gonna die broke. You know that, right?" she said, her voice sharp, like she was cutting me down to size in front of everyone. "You've got nothing to show for your life. No savings, no plan, worthless." I just sat there, fork in hand, feeling my sister-in-law's eyes dart away, embarrassed. Emma looked up, confused, but didn't say anything. I wanted to scream, to tell Karen she didn't know half of what she thought she did, but I kept my mouth shut. That was my mistake, keeping quiet too long. See, what Karen didn't know, what nobody knew, was that I wasn't the broke, washed-up nobody she painted me as. For 20 years, I'd been squirreling away every extra dime from the mill, buying up foreclosed houses around Akron when the market crashed in '08. Little places, fixer-uppers nobody wanted. I'd patch them up on weekends, rent them out, reinvest the cash. By the time of that Thanksgiving, I owned 6 properties outright, pulling in enough rent to cover my bills, and then some. Not a fortune, but enough to call it security, enough to know I wasn't worthless. But I never told Karen. Didn't trust her, not after the way she'd started acting, like I owed her something just for being her father. The fight started over nothing, like it always did. I'd mentioned maybe selling the house one day, moving somewhere smaller since my knees weren't what they used to be. Karen's eyes lit up. Not with concern, but with something greedy. "You can't even manage this place," she snapped. "You're gonna lose it all, and then what? I'm not bailing you out." Greg nodded along, smirking, like he was in on some joke I wasn't. I let it slide, changed the subject, but her words kept echoing. Later, as I scraped plates into the trash, I overheard her whispering to Greg in the kitchen. "He's got nothing. We'll get the house when he crashes and burns." That's when I knew she wasn't just ungrateful. She was plotting. I wasn't always this bitter. Back when Karen was little, I was her hero. I'd carry her on my shoulders at the county fair, win her stuffed bears at the ring toss. She'd draw me pictures, call me daddy, with this big toothy grin. But after Linda left, something in Karen changed. She got quiet, then angry, blaming me for her mom's absence, like I'd driven her away. I didn't. Linda just up and vanished. No note, no warning, leaving me with a kid and a mortgage. I did my best, but Karen never forgave me. By the time she was in high school, she was sneaking out, lying about where she'd been. I thought college would fix things, that she'd see how hard I worked to pay for it. Instead, she came back colder, like I was an embarrassment she had to tolerate. That Thanksgiving wasn't the first time she'd cut me down, but it was the sharpest. I stood in my driveway after they left, watching their taillights disappear under the flickering streetlights, feeling like I'd lost her for good. But I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I got a call from my neighbor, Mrs. Delaney, the nosy type who always had an opinion. "Tom," she said, clucking her tongue, "you gotta do something about your life. It's so empty. No wife, no savings. What's the point?" I smiled tightly, said something polite, but inside I was seething. Empty? She didn't know about the deeds locked in my safe, the bank account I never touched, the tenants who paid on time. Nobody did, and that's how I wanted it for now. But Karen's words and Mrs. Delaney's pity lit a fire in me. I wasn't just going to sit there and take it. I started checking my properties more closely, making sure every lease was airtight, every payment accounted for. I wasn't worthless, and I'd prove it not to Karen, but to myself. What I didn't know then was that Karen was already moving against me, scheming with Greg to take what I'd built. And the worst part? I'd find out just how deep her betrayal went, and it'd come from a place I never saw coming. The morning after that Thanksgiving, I woke up to a house that felt too quiet, the kind of quiet that presses on your chest. The kitchen still smelled faintly of turkey, and Karen's perfume, some floral thing she'd started wearing to seem fancy. I poured another cup of Folgers, reheated it in the microwave, and sat at the counter, staring at a stack of unopened bills in the mailbox I hadn't bothered to check. My mind kept circling back to Karen's words, worthless, and that whisper I'd overheard about getting my house. I wasn't just hurt, I was pissed. But more than that, I was tired. Tired of pretending I didn't see the way she looked at me, like I was a failure she had to clean up after. Back when Karen was a kid, I thought I could fix anything. I was 23 when Linda left, barely old enough to know my ass from my elbow, but I learned fast. The steel mill paid decent, but it was brutal 12-hour shifts, hands calloused so bad they cracked and bled. I'd come home at dawn, shower off the grime, and drive Karen to school in my rusty Chevy pickup, her little backpack bouncing as she chattered about her friends. Those were the good days, when she'd still hug me without rolling her eyes. I'd take her to McDonald's on Fridays, let her get a Happy Meal even when I was scraping change to cover the mortgage. Every cent I had went to her new clothes for picture day, a used piano when she begged for lessons, even a trip to Cedar Point one summer, where she screamed her head off on the roller coasters. I thought I was building something, a life she'd be proud of, but it wasn't enough. By the time she hit her teens, Karen started pulling away. She'd slam her bedroom door, blast Nirvana so loud the neighbors complained. I found cigarettes in her backpack once, and when I confronted her, she screamed that I didn't understand her, that I'd ruined everything by letting her mom leave. I tried to explain Linda's disappearance wasn't my fault, but she didn't want to hear it. The truth was, I didn't know why Linda left either. One day she was there, packing Karen's lunches. The next, her closet was empty, and I was signing divorce papers served by a guy in a cheap suit. I told myself I'd make it up to Karen, give her the life she deserved. So I worked harder, took overtime, missed her school plays. I thought she'd see it one day, the sacrifices I made. Instead, she went to college, paid for by me, and came back acting like I was a stranger. I was sipping my coffee, lost in those memories, when I noticed a piece of mail sticking out from the pile. Not a bill, but an envelope with Karen's handwriting. My stomach knotted. I hadn't seen her write me anything since she was a kid, sending me those crayon birthday cards. I tore it open, expecting maybe an apology for Thanksgiving. No such luck. It was a letter from years ago, one she'd never sent, dated right after she graduated college. "Dad," it read, "I know you think you did your best, but you weren't enough. Mom left because you couldn't keep it together. I had to raise myself. Don't expect me to owe you anything." I read it twice, my hand shaking. She'd written it at 22, kept it all these years, and now it had shown up, like a knife she'd been saving. I didn't know why she'd sent it now. Maybe she'd found it cleaning out her attic, Or maybe she just wanted to twist the blade after Thanksgiving. Either way, it burned. I shoved the letter in a drawer and grabbed my keys. I needed air. Needed to move. I drove to one of my rental properties, a little 2-bedroom on the east side of Akron, the first one I'd bought back in '99. It was a dump, then leaky roof, busted pipes, but I'd fixed it up myself, learning plumbing from library books and YouTube before YouTube was even a thing. Now it was home to a nice couple, paying $900 a month like clockwork. Standing in the driveway, I felt a flicker of pride. This was mine. Proof I wasn't the loser, Karen thought. I had 5 more like it, each one a middle finger to her words. But that letter wasn't the worst of it. Later that week, I was lover, cleaning out my garage, sorting through old tax files, when I found something else: bank statements showing a loan I'd given Karen years ago, $10,000 for her wedding to Greg. I'd forgotten about it, written it off as a gift. But clipped to the statement was a note in Greg's handwriting. Talk to lawyer about house claim. Tom's done for. My blood ran cold. They weren't just talking trash. They were planning to take my house, my life, everything I'd built. I sat there on a milk crate, surrounded by dusty boxes, realizing my own daughter was betting on my failure. She thought I'd crash and burn, leave her an easy inheritance. She didn't know about the properties, the savings, the plan I'd been working on for decades, and I wasn't about to tell her. Not yet. I drove to Walmart that night, just to get out of my head, wandering the aisles under those harsh fluorescent lights. I bought a cheap notebook, started jotting down every detail I could remember about Karen's behavior, Greg's smirks, that letter. Something was coming, something worse than a nasty dinner fight. I could feel it, like the ache in my knees before a storm. As I pushed my cart past the clearance bins, I made a decision. I'd play along, let Karen think I was the broke old man she wanted me to be. But I'd be watching, waiting. She'd learn soon enough who I really was. I stood in the Walmart parking lot, tossing that cheap notebook onto the passenger seat of my pickup, the engine ticking as it cooled under a flickering streetlight. The air smelled like asphalt and fast food, and I could still hear Karen's voice in my head, calling me worthless, mixed with Greg's scribbled note about claiming my house. My house, the one I'd paid off through years of skipped vacations and patched-together boots. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was done playing the fool. Karen thought she had me figured out, but she didn't know the half of it. Nobody did. And that's how I'd built my little empire. One nobody in this gossipy Akron suburb could have guessed. Back in '99, when the mill started cutting hours and Karen was off at college, I stumbled into real estate by accident. A buddy at work mentioned a foreclosure auction, houses going for pennies because nobody had the cash or guts to bid. I showed up with $4,000 scraped from my savings, hands sweaty, and walked away with that 2-bedroom on the east side. It was a wreck mold in the walls, a yard full of junk, but I saw potential. Nights and weekends, I'd be there with a hammer and a prayer, teaching myself how to fix drywall and unclog pipes. By 2002, it was rented out, bringing in $600 a month. That first check felt like a lifeline, proof I could build something without leaning on anyone. Over the years, I kept at it, buying 5 more properties, small houses, a duplex, even a triplex near the university. I wasn't flashy. I drove the same '98 Chevy, wore flannel shirts from Goodwill. To the neighbors, I was just Tom, the quiet guy who'd raised a kid alone and probably drank too much coffee. To my tenants, I was the landlord who fixed leaks fast and didn't jack up rent. To Karen, I was nothing. I kept it all secret, not out of shame, but strategy. Karen had started acting entitled in college, always asking for money, never saying thanks. When she married Greg, it got worse. He'd drop hints about helping me manage my finances, like I was some senile old coot at 45. I didn't trust him, with his gelled hair and used car salesman grin, and I sure as hell didn't trust Karen to keep my business private. So I played broke, complained about bills, let my lawn go a little shaggy, Never mentioned the bank account growing quietly or the deeds locked in a fireproof safe in my basement. It was easier that way. Safer. But after finding Greg's note in the garage, I knew safe wasn't enough anymore. Karen's visit a few weeks after Thanksgiving confirmed it. She showed up unannounced, Greg in tow, their SUV gleaming like they were trying to prove something. I was in the middle of changing a light bulb, standing on a wobbly stool, when she knocked. "Dad, you look like hell," she said, brushing past me into the living room. No hello, no hug. Greg just nodded, eyeing my furniture like he was pricing it for a yard sale. They sat on my couch, Karen crossing her arms, launching into a lecture about how I needed to get my affairs in order. She mentioned a retirement home, said I couldn't hack it alone anymore. I stood there, bulb in hand, letting her talk, my jaw tight. "You've got no savings, no future," she said. "You're gonna drag us all down with you," Greg chimed in, all fake concern. "We just want to help, Tom. Help my ass." I wanted to laugh, to tell him about the $12,000 a month in rent I was pulling, the properties I owned free and clear. Instead, I mumbled something about managing fine and offered them coffee. That's when I heard it. Karen excused herself to the bathroom, but I caught her voice from the hallway, low and sharp on her phone. "He's got nothing," she said. "We'll get the house easy once he's out of the picture. Just push the lawyer." My heart pounded, but I kept my face blank when she came back, sipping her coffee like nothing happened. Greg was poking around my bookshelf, pretending to admire my old Reader's Digest collection, but I saw his eyes dart to my desk, where a stack of mortgage papers, fake ones I'd left out, sat in plain view. I'd started keeping decoys around, just in case. They left soon after, Karen barely looking at me, Greg with that smirk again. I locked the door behind them, my hands shaking not from fear but rage. I spent that night in my basement, pulling out my real files, deeds, leases, tax records, all organized in plastic bins. I checked every detail, made sure nothing was out of place. My empire was solid. But Karen's call about pushing the lawyer gnawed at me. What was she planning? Declaring me incompetent? Contesting my will? I didn't have one yet. Never thought I'd need it at 58, but maybe it was time. I poured a whiskey, sat under the bare bulb in my basement, and started thinking like the landlord I was. Strategic, not emotional. Karen thought she could outsmart me, but she'd forgotten who raised her, who taught her to play chess and spot a liar. I'd let her think she was winning, let her dig her own grave. But I needed to be ready for whatever she threw next. The next morning, I got a call from my tenant in the duplex, a retired nurse named Carla. She sounded nervous, said someone had been by asking questions about the property, claiming to be family. My gut twisted. I told her to keep quiet, said I'd handle it. As I hung up, I looked out my window at the mailbox stuffed with bills, the neighbor's dog barking at nothing. Karen was moving faster than I'd thought, and I was running out of time to stay one step ahead. I hung up the phone with Carla, my tenant, and stood in my kitchen, gripping the counter so hard my knuckles whitened. The idea of someone, probably Karen or Greg, snooping around my duplex, asking questions like they had a right, made my blood boil. I poured another coffee, even though it was late afternoon and my stomach was already sour from too much caffeine. Outside, the Akron sky was gray, promising rain, and my backyard looked as tired as I felt overgrown grass, a rusty patio chair, a barbecue grill I hadn't touched since last summer. I needed to clear my head, so I decided to host a family barbecue that weekend. Not because I wanted to play happy family, but because I needed to see Karen and Greg up close, test their moves, figure out how far they'd take this. The barbecue was Saturday, and I spent the morning hauling bags of charcoal and burgers from Walmart, the same one where I'd bought that notebook weeks ago. I set up in the backyard, stringing some dollar store lights around the fence, trying to make it look like I gave a damn. My sister-in-law, Patty, showed up first with her famous potato salad, her husband trailing behind with a case of Bud Light. A few cousins came too, plus some neighbors who smelled the grill and invited themselves. Karen and Greg rolled in late, their SUV crunching gravel in my driveway. Emma and Jake spilling out with shy smiles. Those kids were the only reason I didn't slam the door in their parents' faces. Emma, 12, ran over and hugged me, her ponytail bouncing. "Grandpa, you got the good hot dogs," she said, eyeing the pack of Nathans. Jake, 10, asked if I'd fix his bike tire later, and I nodded, ruffling his hair. For a second, I felt like the hero they saw me as, not the worthless loser their mom thought. Karen barely looked at me, clutching a wine glass she'd brought herself, already sipping before the food was served. Greg was all charm, shaking hands, cracking jokes about the Browns' losing streak. But I caught him scanning my yard, his eyes lingering on the garage, the shed, the back fence, like he was measuring it for a for sale sign. We sat around folding tables I'd borrowed from the church, plates piled with burgers and coleslaw, the air thick with charcoal smoke and small talk. Then Karen started in, her voice loud enough to carry. "Dad, you really need to fix this place up," she said, gesturing at the peeling paint on my house. "It's falling apart, like everything else." Patty shot me a sympathetic look, but the neighbors smirked, like they agreed. I forced a laugh, said, "Yeah, well, keeps me busy." But inside, I was seething. She wasn't just needling me, she was setting the stage, making everyone think I was one bad day from losing it all. It got worse. As the sun dipped and the string lights flickered on, Karen got louder, her wine glass empty for the third time. "You're gonna be a burden, Dad," she said, leaning forward, her words slurring. "No savings, no plan, just sitting here waiting to die. We can't keep cleaning up your messes." The backyard went quiet, forks pausing mid-bite. Emma looked down at her plate, her face red. Jake whispered, "Mom, stop," but she ignored him. Greg put a hand on her arm, fake concern again, but I saw the glint in his eye. He was loving this. I wanted to flip the table, tell her about the $1.2 million in properties I owned, the bank account she'd never touch. Instead, I stood up, grabbed a beer, and said, "Thanks for the feedback, Karen." Desserts inside. My voice was calm, but my hands shook as I walked to the kitchen. Inside, I leaned against the fridge, breathing hard, listening to the chatter pick back up outside. Emma slipped in, holding a paper plate. "Grandpa, you okay?" she asked, her big eyes worried. I forced a smile, said, "Just fine, kiddo." She hesitated, then said, "Mom's been weird lately. She keeps talking about your house, like it's hers." My heart skipped. I hugged her, told her not to worry, but her words stuck with me. The kids were noticing things, and that was dangerous for Karen. I sent Emma back out, promising to fix Jake's bike tomorrow, and started cleaning dishes to keep my hands busy. That's when my phone buzzed. It was my lawyer, Ed, a gruff guy I'd known since the mill days. "Tom, we got a problem," he said, his voice low. "One of your properties, the triplex on Maple, has a title issue. Someone filed a claim, says they're entitled to part of it. You need to come in Monday." I froze, soap dripping from my hands. "Who filed it?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Ed paused. "I can't say yet, but it's messy. Bring all your paperwork." I hung up, staring at the sink, the water circling the drain. Karen's phone call about pushing the lawyer echoed in my head. She wasn't just talking about my house anymore. She was going after my rentals, my empire. And Greg, with his wandering eyes, was probably in on it. As I stepped back outside, Karen was laughing too loud, Greg's arm around her, both of them oblivious to the storm brewing in me. I looked at my grandkids, playing tag with the neighbor's dog, and felt a pang. They didn't deserve this mess, but they were caught in it. I'd protect what was mine, not just for me, but for them. Karen thought she could bury me, but she was about to learn how deep my roots went. I spent the rest of that BBQ watching Karen and Greg like a hawk, my mind racing from Ed's call about the title claim on my triplex. The backyard was still buzzing, neighbors laughing, kids chasing fireflies, the smoky smell of charcoal lingering. But I felt like I was in a different world, one where every word and glance was a chess move. Karen was still holding court, her wineglass refilled, telling some story about her stressful job as a real estate agent's assistant, while Greg nodded along, his eyes darting to my garage again. I kept my face neutral, flipping burgers, but inside I was piecing it together. The phone call I'd overheard, Greg's note about claiming my house, now this legal jab at my triplex. They weren't just talking, they were moving against me, and fast. Monday morning, I was at Ed's office before he even unlocked the door. A thermos of coffee in one hand and a file box of property records in the other. His office was a cramped room above a barber shop in downtown Akron, smelling of old paper and stale cigarettes. Ed, a heavy-set guy with a comb-over and a tie that never matched his shirt, waved me in, looking grim. "Tom, this is a mess," he said, tossing a stack of papers on his desk. "Someone filed a claim saying they've got a stake in the Maple Street triplex. Says you gave them money years ago, and it counts as an investment." I leaned forward, my stomach twisting. "Who's the claimant?" I asked, though I already knew. Ed sighed, rubbing his temples. "It's Karen, your daughter." I felt like I'd been punched. I knew she was scheming, but seeing her name on legal documents, trying to claw a piece of what I'd built, it was a betrayal I hadn't braced for. Ed showed me the filing. Karen claimed the $10,000 I'd given her for her wedding was a loan for the triplex, entitling her to partial ownership. Never mind that I'd bought that property 5 years before her wedding, with my own cash, no help from her or anyone. The filing was flimsy, full of holes, but it was enough to tie things up in court, cost me money, maybe force a sale if I didn't fight back. "She's banking on you not having the records," Ed said, lighting a cigarette despite the no smoking sign. "Or the energy to fight." I opened my file box, pulling out deeds, receipts, bank statements, every scrap of paper I'd kept for 20 years. "She's wrong," I said, my voice low but steady. Ed grinned. "Attaboy, Tom. Let's bury this." Driving home, I was torn between rage and something heavier, grief maybe. Karen wasn't just ungrateful. She was trying to steal from me, her own father. I thought back to her wedding, how I'd handed her that check. My hands still rough from fixing a tenant's furnace the day before. She'd hugged me then, called me her hero. Now she was forging lies to take what was mine. I pulled into my driveway, the mailbox stuffed with more bills, and sat there, engine idling, wondering how it had come to this. I'd raised her, sacrificed everything, and now she was betting I'd roll over. I decided to play dumb, keep acting like the broke retiree she thought I was. No fancy clothes, no slip-ups about my rentals. I'd let her think she was winning, let her dig deeper. But I started locking my files in a new safe, one with a combination only I knew, and I called Carla at the duplex, told her to let me know if anyone else came sniffing around. She sounded worried but loyal. She'd been a tenant for years, always paid on time, even brought me homemade banana bread at Christmas. "Tom, you watch yourself," she said. "Something's not right." That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat in my rocking chair, the TV droning some rerun of Law & Order, and went through my mental checklist. 6 properties, all paid off, pulling in $12,000 a month, a savings account with enough to cover me for years. I wasn't rich, but I was solid. Karen didn't know any of it, and that was my edge. But as I sipped my whiskey, I heard a noise outside, a car slowing down, then speeding off. I got up, peered through the blinds, and saw nothing but the neighbor's cat slinking across the street. Still, my gut said trouble was close. The next day, I was mowing my lawn, sweat soaking my flannel, when I caught Greg's SUV cruising by. Slow, like he was casing the place. He didn't stop, just waved, like it was nothing. but I saw him craning his neck toward my backyard, where I kept a shed full of tools and old property records. I waved back, forcing a smile, but my mind was racing. He wasn't just curious, he was looking for something, maybe proof of what I owned. I finished mowing, locked the shed with a new padlock, and called Ed again. "Check if Greg's name's on anything," I said. "I don't trust him," Ed grunted. "You're preaching to the choir, Tom. I'll dig." As I hung up, I looked at my house, peeling paint, sagging gutters, but mine, every inch. Karen thought she could take it, thought I was too weak to fight. She was wrong, but she wasn't alone. Someone was helping her, someone who knew how to play dirty. And I had a sinking feeling I'd find out who soon enough. I spent the next few days on edge, checking my locks twice, keeping my phone close in case Ed called with news about Greg or Karen's legal stunt. The air in Akron was getting colder, leaves piling up in my yard, and every creak of my Akron house felt like a warning. I needed to get out, clear my head, so I went to the Sunday potluck at First Baptist, the church I'd been dragging myself to since Karen was a kid. It wasn't about faith, more about habit, and the free coffee wasn't bad either. The fellowship hall smelled like casseroles and burnt macaroni, folding tables groaning under Pyrex dishes, and plastic pitchers of sweet tea. I brought my usual a tray of store-bought brownies from Walmart because nobody expects a single guy to cook, but I wasn't there for the food. I wanted to listen, see if Karen's scheming had leaked into the town's gossip mill. The place was packed with the usual crowd, retirees in polyester, a few young families, and the church ladies who could sniff out drama like bloodhounds. I grabbed a paper plate, piled on some green bean casserole, and sat near the back, nodding at familiar faces. Mrs. Delaney, my nosy neighbor, was holding court by the dessert table, her voice carrying over the hum of conversation. "Poor Tom Bennett," she said, loud enough to make sure I heard. "Living all alone in that falling-down house, no savings, no future. His daughter's got her hands full with him." I kept my eyes on my plate, chewing slowly, but my ears were wide open. She wasn't just gossiping, she was parroting Karen's story, the one she'd been peddling to anyone who'd listen. I caught a few pitying glances from the crowd, and it took everything not to slam my fork down and set them straight. Then I overheard something worse. Mrs. Delaney leaned in, her voice dropping to a stage whisper. "Karen says he's losing it, forgetting things, mixing up bills. She's talking about getting him evaluated, maybe a home." My stomach churned. Evaluated? That was code for declaring me incompetent, the kind of move that could strip me of control over my properties, my bank account, everything. I forced a smile when Mrs. Delaney glanced my way, but my mind was racing. Karen wasn't just after the triplex, she was building a case to take it all, painting me as a senile old man who couldn't tie his own shoes. The church ladies nodded along, clucking like hens, and I realized she'd been working the rumor mill for weeks, maybe months. I was about to leave, my appetite gone, when old Mr. Peterson, a retired mechanic who'd known me since the mill days, pulled me aside by the coffee urn. "Tom," he said, his voice low, "watch your back. I saw Karen at the diner last week, meeting some guy in a suit. Looked like a real estate type, all slick. They were talking about you, and it wasn't good." I asked. He shrugged, scratching his beard. "Something about properties, liens, getting you sorted out. I didn't catch it all, but she didn't sound like a daughter ought to." I thanked him, my mind spinning. A real estate guy? That had Greg's fingerprints all over it, but it also meant Karen was playing a bigger game than I'd thought. Back home, I poured a whiskey and sat in my rocking chair, the TV flickering with some cop show I wasn't watching. The church gossip and Peterson's warning had me rattled, but they also lit a fire. Karen was spreading lies, building a narrative to justify her grab for my assets. I opened my safe, checked my files again, every deed, every lease, every receipt. They were my armor, proof she couldn't touch me. But then I noticed something odd in the paperwork for the duplex on Elm Street, one of my first properties. Tucked in the folder was an old envelope, yellowed and brittle, addressed to me in a handwriting I hadn't seen in 30 years. Linda's, my ex-wife. My heart stopped. I hadn't heard from her since she walked out, leaving me and Karen with nothing but a stack of unpaid bills. I opened it with shaking hands. The letter was short, dated a year after she left. "Tom," it read, "I'm sorry, but I had to go. The debts were too much, and you couldn't handle them. I'll make it right one day. Don't tell Karen." Debts? What debts? I'd spent years thinking Linda left because she didn't love us. But this hinted at something else. Something she'd kept hidden. And why was it in the duplex file? I'd bought that place years after she left, or so I thought. My memory was fuzzy on the timeline, but the letter felt like a ghost reaching out, stirring up questions I wasn't ready to answer. Worse, it made me wonder if Karen knew more about her mom than she'd let on. Had Linda been in touch with her, feeding her lies? The thought made my skin crawl. I locked the letter in the safe, my mind buzzing. Karen's betrayal was bad enough, but this Linda's shadow creeping back felt like a deeper cut. I needed answers, but first I had to deal with the fight in front of me. Karen was out there, spinning her web, and now some real estate shark was circling. I'd play her game, keep acting like the broke old man she expected, but I was done being blindsided. Tomorrow, I'd call Ed, dig into this mystery real estate guy. For now, I sat back, the whiskey burning my throat, listening to the house creak and wondering just how many secrets my family was hiding. The letter from Linda sat heavy on my mind, like a brick in my gut, as I locked the safe and turned off the basement light. The creak of the stairs echoed in my quiet house, matching the unease creeping up my spine. I poured another whiskey, sat in my rocking chair, and stared at the envelope's faint outline in my memory, Linda's loopy handwriting, the words about debts and not telling Karen. It didn't add up. For 30 years, I'd believed she left because she couldn't handle being a mom, or maybe she just didn't love me anymore. Now, this letter, hidden in my duplex file, suggested something else, something tied to money I never knew about. And worse, it made me wonder if Karen's betrayal wasn't just her own greed, but something Linda had planted years ago. I barely slept that night, the TV's hum blending with the wind rattling my windows. By morning, my coffee was cold before I took a sip, and I was already dialing Ed, my lawyer, to dig into this real estate guy Mr. Peterson saw with Karen. But my head was stuck on that letter. I drove to the Elm Street duplex, a squat brick building I'd bought in '02, thinking maybe there'd be more clues. The place was quiet. Carla's car gone. She worked days at the hospital. I let myself in with a master key, the familiar smell of old wood and fresh paint hitting me. The tenants kept it tidy, but I wasn't there to inspect. I went to the attic, where I'd stored some boxes from the purchase, stuff I'd never bothered to sort through. If Linda's letter ended up in my files, maybe there was more. The attic was dusty, cobwebs catching the light from a single bulb. I found the box, labeled Elm Street Closing Docs, and started digging. Most of it was junk old utility bills. A termite inspection, but then I found another envelope, same handwriting, tucked inside a folder of mortgage papers. My hands shook as I opened it. This one was dated a year later than the first, '93, when Karen was 8. "Tom," it read, "I know you'll never forgive me, but I had to leave. The debts were mine, not yours. I didn't want you or Karen dragged down. I've been watching from a distance. Karen deserves the truth someday." My throat tightened. Watching from a distance? Debts she didn't tell me about? I'd spent years paying off credit cards and medical bills I thought we'd racked up together, never questioning if they were hers alone. And now this hint she'd been keeping tabs on us on Karen felt like a betrayal deeper than her leaving. I sat on the attic floor, dust sticking to my jeans, trying to piece it together. Had Linda reached out to Karen? Was that why Karen hated me so much? Why she thought I'd Failed her? I remembered her teenage years, how she'd get secretive phone calls, lock herself in her room. I'd thought it was boyfriends, rebellion. Now I wondered if it was Linda, filling her head with lies about me. The thought made my chest ache, but it also lit a spark. If Linda was part of this, I needed to know how and why her letter was in the duplex file. Had she been involved in the property somehow? I'd bought it through a foreclosure auction, but the seller was a bank, not a person, or so I thought. I called Ed from the attic, my voice echoing off the rafters. Check the Elm Street duplex records, I said. See if there's anything weird about the purchase, any names tied to it besides mine. Ed grunted, used to my hunches. You think this is connected to Karen's claim on the triplex? He asked. Maybe, I said. Just check. I hung up, drove home, and spent the afternoon pacing, the letter burning a hole in my pocket. I didn't tell anyone about it, not yet. It felt too raw, like picking a scab. That evening, Emma and Jake showed up unannounced, their bikes wobbling into my driveway. "Grandpa!" Jake called, waving like he hadn't seen me in years. Emma hugged me, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mom's at some meeting," she said, rolling her eyes. "Said we could hang here." I let them in, grateful for the distraction, and we ordered pizza, the kind with extra pepperoni they loved. As they sprawled on my couch, watching some cartoon on my ancient TV, Jake pointed out the window. "Hey, Grandpa, you got one of those signs." He was looking at a for rent sign leaning against my garage, left over from a vacancy at the triplex. "You a landlord or something?" he asked, grinning. Emma laughed. "Yeah, Grandpa's the landlord king." They were joking, but my heart skipped. They didn't know, couldn't know, but their words hit close. I played it off, chuckling. Just helping a friend with some rentals, I lied, hating how easy it came. They didn't push, but Emma gave me a look, like she sensed I wasn't telling the whole truth. After they left, I sat in my rocking chair, the house quiet again, Linda's letter on the coffee table. Karen was out there, scheming with some real estate guy, spreading lies about my sanity. Now Linda's ghost was back, hinting at secrets that could unravel everything. I didn't know who to trust anymore, but I knew one thing. I'd protect what was mine, even if it meant facing a past I'd buried long ago. I was up before dawn the next morning, the weight of Linda's letter still pressing on me like a bad dream. The coffee pot gurgled as I stared out my kitchen window, the Akron streetlights flickering off one by one. Ed's call about the duplex records was coming today, but I had bigger fish to fry first, a court hearing about Karen's claim on my triplex. She'd filed that motion to declare me incompetent, citing erratic behavior and financial instability, and today was my chance to shut it down. I wasn't nervous, not exactly, more like a coiled spring ready to snap. I'd spent years building my empire, keeping every receipt, every contract, and now my own daughter was trying to tear it apart. I'd play her game, but on my terms. I dressed the part: old flannel shirt, faded jeans, a pair of work boots I hadn't worn since the mill closed. If Karen wanted to paint me as a broke, doddering old man, I'd give her the performance of a lifetime. I stuffed my real documents, deeds, leases, bank statements into a battered briefcase, but I left a few decoy papers on my desk at home, just in case Greg came snooping again. Ed met me at the Summit County Courthouse, a gray slab of a building that smelled like floor wax and despair. He looked me up and down, shaking his head. "Tom, you look like you just crawled out of a ditch," he said, half laughing. "Good," I replied. "Let's keep her guessing." Inside the courtroom, Karen sat with her lawyer, a young guy with a cheap suit and a nervous tic. She wouldn't meet my eyes, just stared at her manicured nails, her face tight like she was the victim here. Greg was there too, in the back, his arms crossed, smirking like he'd already won. The judge, a tired-looking woman with glasses perched on her nose, called the case. Karen's lawyer stood, launching into a sob story about my declining mental state and inability to manage my affairs. He waved a stack of papers, claiming my triplex was partly hers because of that $10,000 wedding investment. It was all lies, and flimsy ones my record showed I'd bought the triplex years before her wedding, with no contribution from her. But the incompetence claim was the real threat. If they convinced the judge I was unfit, they could push for a conservator, someone to control my assets. Someone like Karen. I let Ed handle the defense, keeping my head down, slouching a little to sell the act. He shredded their case, presenting my meticulously kept records, bank statements showing steady rental income, even a letter from my doctor saying I was sharp as ever. Mr. Bennett is far from incompetent, Ed said, his voice booming. This claim is baseless, a transparent attempt to seize assets he's worked decades to build. The judge nodded, scribbling notes, and I saw Karen's face tighten, but I wasn't celebrating yet. I knew this was just round one. Then came the bombshell. Ed, with a flair I didn't know he had, dropped a new piece of evidence, a private investigator's report he'd ordered, without telling me. It linked Greg to a shady real estate developer, a guy named Vince Russo, who'd been buying up properties from elderly owners at cut-rate prices. The report showed texts between Greg and Russo, planning to flip my triplex once Karen's claim went through. The courtroom went quiet, the judge raising an eyebrow. Karen's lawyer stammered, clearly blindsided, and Greg's smirk vanished. I stared at him, my blood pounding, realizing this wasn't just Karen's greed. It was a calculated scam, and Greg was neck-deep in it. The judge dismissed the incompetence claim, citing insufficient evidence, but let the triplex dispute move forward to a later hearing. "Get your ducks in a row, Miss Bennett," she warned Karen, her tone sharp. As we left, Karen stormed out, Greg trailing her, neither looking my way. Ed clapped my shoulder. "You played that well, Tom," he said. "But they're not done." I nodded, my mind already on those texts. Russo wasn't just some random developer, he was a predator, and Greg was his errand boy. How long had they been planning this? Since before Thanksgiving? Longer? I drove home, the radio off, my thoughts loud enough. The investigator's report meant Greg had been working angles I hadn't seen, maybe for years. I thought about Linda's letter again, her talk of debts and watching from a distance. Was she tied to this somehow? I shook it off. Linda was a ghost, not my problem right now. My problem was Karen and Greg, and whatever they'd try next. I pulled into my driveway, the mailbox overflowing again, and noticed my shed door ajar. I hadn't left it like that. My pulse quickened as I grabbed a flashlight and checked inside, nothing missing, but a box of old property records had been rifled through, papers scattered. Someone had been here, and I'd bet my last dollar it was Greg. I locked the shed, my hands steady but my mind racing. Karen's courtroom stunt had failed, but she'd shown her hand, and Greg's. They weren't just after my house or the triplex. They wanted it all, and they had help. I went inside, poured a whiskey, and sat in my rocking chair, the TV flickering with some late-night news I didn't hear. I needed to tighten my defenses, maybe set a trap of my own. Karen thought she could outsmart me, but I'd been playing chess while she was still throwing tantrums. The next move was mine. I sat in my rocking chair that night, the whiskey glass sweating in my hand, the shed break-in replaying in my head like a bad movie. The scattered papers, the open box, it wasn't random. Greg had been here, probably looking for proof of what I owned, something to feed his buddy Russo. The courtroom win had bought me time, but Karen and Greg were circling closer, and I could feel the noose tightening. I glanced at the safe in my basement, where Linda's letters and my property deeds were locked away, and wondered if I'd missed something bigger. The TV droned on, some weather report about a storm coming, but my mind was on my grandkids, Emma and Jake. Their innocent Landlord King comment at the pizza night stuck with me. They were starting to notice things, and that could be my edge or my undoing. The next day was a Saturday, and I was out back fixing Jake's bike tire like I'd promised, the air crisp with that early fall bite. Emma sat cross-legged on the grass, scrolling on her phone, her ponytail swinging as she laughed at some meme. "Grandpa, you're like a bike wizard," Jake said, watching me patch the tube with an old kit I'd had since the 90 seconds. I chuckled, but my eyes kept darting to the street, half expecting Greg's SUV to cruise by again. Emma looked up, her face serious all of a sudden.
"Grandpa, why is Mom so mad at you all the time?"
she asked, her voice quiet, like she was afraid of the answer. I froze, the tire iron heavy in my hand. Kids see more than you think, and Emma was sharp, too sharp for her own good. I set the tire down, wiping my hands on a rag. "Your mom and we've got history," I said, keeping it vague. "Sometimes people hold on to old hurts." Emma frowned, picking at the grass. "She's been weird lately, talking about your house, saying you can't handle stuff. Jake heard her tell Dad you're losing it." Jake nodded, kicking a pebble. "Yeah, she said you're gonna lose everything, and we'll get the house." I didn't get it. My chest tightened. I wanted to tell them the truth, spill it all my properties, their mom's lies, Greg's scam with Russo. But they were kids, caught in the middle, and I couldn't drag them into this mess. Not yet. Instead, I changed the subject, handing Jake his bike. "Good as new," I said, forcing a grin. But Emma wasn't done. She pulled out her phone, showed me a photo she'd found in their attic, a grainy shot of me standing in front of the Elm Street duplex, younger, smiling, holding a sold sign. "When was this?" she asked. "You don't own that place, do you?" My heart skipped. That photo was from '02, right after I'd bought the duplex at auction. I hadn't known anyone snapped it, let alone that Karen kept it. "Just a friend's place," I lied, my voice steady. "Helped him fix it up." Emma squinted, like she wasn't buying it. But Jake was already racing his bike around the yard, shouting about being the fastest. Their visit left me rattled. The kids were asking questions, piecing things together, and that photo was a problem. If Karen had it, she might have known about the duplex longer than I thought. Had she been digging into my properties before the triplex claim? I called Ed that evening, told him about the photo and the shed break-in. "Sounds like Greg's getting sloppy," he said. "I checked on that duplex like you asked. No red flags in the purchase, but the bank that sold it to you had a lien from a prior owner. Name didn't ring a bell, but I'm digging deeper." I thanked him, my mind drifting back to Linda's letter about debts. Was that lien hers? Was she tied to the duplex somehow? I pushed the thought away. Focus on the fight in front of you, Tom. That night, Karen showed up unannounced, banging on my door while I was heating up leftover pizza. She was alone, no Greg, her face flushed, like she'd been crying or drinking. "We need to talk," she said, pushing past me into the living room. I braced myself, keeping my voice calm. "What's up?" She paced, her heels clicking on my worn hardwood. "You humiliated me in court," she snapped, "making me look like a liar in front of everyone."
"You're not right in the head, Dad, and I'm trying to help you."
I almost laughed. She was still playing the concerned daughter, even after her scam got exposed. "Help me?" I said, crossing my arms. "Like trying to take my triplex? That kind of help?" Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "You don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice shook. Then she went for the jugular. "Keep this up, and you'll never see Emma and Jake again." I stood there, pizza forgotten, as she stormed out, slamming the door. Her threat hit hard. Those kids were my world, the only good thing left from her. But it also told me something. She was desperate, lashing out because her plan was crumbling. I locked the door, my hands steady now, and went to my safe. I pulled out Linda's letters, reread them, looking for anything I'd missed. Karen's threat, the kids' questions, that photo, it was all connected, and I was running out of time to figure out how. I needed to stay one step ahead, maybe bait Greg and Russo into a mistake. As I sat back in my rocking chair, the TV flickering with static, I started planning my next move, something to make them show their hand. Karen's threat to cut me off from Emma and Jake left a sour taste that no amount of whiskey could wash away. I sat in my rocking chair that night, the TV stuck on some late-night talk show I wasn't watching, my mind churning through her words, the kids' questions, that damn photo of me at the duplex. She was desperate, and desperate people make mistakes, but so do angry ones, and I was plenty angry. The shed break-in, Greg's. Shady texts with Russo. The lien Ed mentioned on the duplex. It was all closing in, like a storm cloud over my little Akron empire. I needed to act, not just react, so I decided to set a trap. If Greg and Russo thought they could pick me clean, I'd give them just enough rope to hang themselves. The next morning, I called Ed from my kitchen, the coffee pot hissing as I paced. "I want to float a rumor," I said. "Make it look like I'm selling the triplex, cheap, cash only, see who bites." Ed paused, then chuckled. "You're a sneaky bastard, Tom. I like it. I'll get the word out discreet, through my contacts in real estate." I'd spent years teaching myself real estate law, reading foreclosure notices, studying property records at the county clerk's office. I knew how to play this game better than Greg, maybe even better than Russo. If they thought I was a confused old man, I'd use that to draw them out. I spent the day at the triplex, checking the units, chatting with tenants to keep up appearances. The place was solid 3 apartments, good renters, $2,100 a month in my pocket. But I made a show of looking stressed, muttering about selling to one tenant, loud enough for a nosy neighbor to overhear. Word travels fast in Akron, especially when money's involved. By evening, Ed called back. "Got a nibble," he said. Vince Russo's office reached out, asking about the triplex. Said they heard you're distressed, looking to unload quick. I smirked, stirring my cold coffee. "Set up a meeting. Tell them I'm desperate, but I want to meet in person." Ed laughed. "You're gonna eat this guy alive, Tom." The meeting was set for Friday at a diner off Route 8, the kind of place with sticky booths and waitresses who call you honorable. I showed up early, wearing my same old flannel and jeans, carrying a fake folder of urgent sale. Papers half filled with blank forms to look convincing. Russo was late, strutting in with a leather jacket and a smile like a used car salesman. Greg was with him, looking twitchy, avoiding my eyes. "Tom, good to meet you," Russo said, sliding into the booth, his cologne strong enough to choke me. "Heard you're in a bind. Need to offload that triplex fast." I nodded, playing the part, rubbing my neck like I was nervous. "Yeah, things are tight," I said. "Bills piling up, you know." Greg shifted, his knee bouncing under the table. I could practically hear his gears grinding, thinking he'd won. Russo leaned in, dropping his voice. "I can take it off your hands. $150,000. Cash. No questions. Market's tough, but I'm doing you a favor." I mumbled something about thinking it over, letting them see the desperate old man they expected. But I was watching Russo's hands, the way he kept glancing at Greg, like they were signaling each other. I pushed the fake folder toward them, saying, "Here's the paperwork, but I need a day or two." Russo's eyes lit up, too eager, and I knew I had him hooked. That night, I was back home, the TV flickering with some crime drama, when Ed called again. "Tom, you're a genius," he said. "Russo's been digging into your other properties. Found records of him sniffing around the duplex, too, through a shell company. And get this, Greg's been signing documents as a consultant for him." My grip tightened on the phone. So Greg wasn't just Russo's errand boy, he was in deep, maybe deeper than Karen. I thanked Ed, hung up, and went to my safe, pulling out my real records. Every property was clean, titled in my name. No liens, except that mysterious one on the duplex Ed was still chasing. I was ready to crush their scam, but I needed proof they'd crossed the line. Then, it happened. Around midnight, I heard a crash, outside glass breaking, followed by footsteps crunching in my backyard. I grabbed the flashlight and a baseball bat from under my bed, heart pounding, and crept to the back door. The shed was open again, the lock busted, and I saw a shadow moving inside. I flipped on the floodlight I'd installed after the last break-in, catching Greg red-handed, a crowbar in one hand, my box of old deeds in the other. He froze, eyes wide like a deer in headlights. "Tom, this isn't what it looks like," he stammered, dropping the box. Papers scattered across the dirt. I stepped closer, bat in hand, my voice low. "Get the hell off my property, Greg, and tell Russo he's done." He bolted, tripping over a garden hose, and I let him go. I had what I needed him on my security camera, caught breaking in. The trap had worked, but it left me cold. My own son-in-law stealing from me in the dead of night. What was Karen's part in this? And how much deeper did this go? I stood in my backyard, the floodlight casting harsh shadows over the scattered papers Greg had dropped, my baseball bat still heavy in my hand. The night air was cold, biting through my flannel, but I barely felt it. Greg's panicked face, his lame excuse it was all burned into me, proof of how low he'd sunk. My security camera, a cheap one I'd bought at Walmart after the first shed break-in, had caught everything. Greg prying open the lock, rummaging through my deeds, tripping as he ran. I gathered the papers, my hands steady despite the adrenaline, and locked them back in my safe. The bat stayed by my side as I sat in my rocking chair. The TV off for once, the silence loud with what I'd just seen. My own son-in-law, sneaking around like a thief, working for Russo to strip me bare. But the real question gnawed at me. How much did Karen know? I didn't call the cops, not yet. I wanted to confront Greg first, see how deep this went, and if Karen was pulling the strings or just along for the ride. The next morning I called Ed, told him about the break-in, and sent him the camera footage. "Jesus, Tom," he said, his voice rough through the phone. "This is felony stuff, breaking and entering, attempted theft. You want to press charges?" I hesitated, staring at the cold coffee on my counter, the mailbox still stuffed with bills I hadn't opened. "Not yet," I said. "I want to talk to him first. Set him up." Ed sighed. "You're playing with fire, but I'll back you. I'm still digging on that duplex lien, might tie to this Russo guy. Sit tight." I didn't sit tight. I texted Greg, short and sharp, "Meet me at the diner, noon. We need to talk." No mention of the break-in, no hint I had him on tape. He replied fast, too fast. "Sure, Tom. Everything okay?" The fake concern made my skin crawl. I drove to the diner early, same sticky booths as before, and ordered a black coffee, my eyes on the door. Greg showed up right on time, looking like he hadn't slept, bags under his eyes, his usual slick grin gone. He slid into the booth, hands fidgeting. He asked, his voice too casual. I leaned forward, keeping my voice low, steady. "I know you broke into my shed last night, Greg. I've got you on camera, crowbar and all. You're working with Russo to steal my properties. Start talking, or I go to the cops." His face went white, like I'd yanked the air out of him. For a second, I thought he'd bolt, but he just slumped, rubbing his hands over his face. "It's not what you think," he started, but I cut him off. "Don't lie to me. I know about Russo, the texts, the triplex scam. What's Karen's part in this?" He swallowed hard, eyes darting to the window, then back to me. She doesn't know everything," he said. "I got in over my head with Russo. He's got connections, Tom. Bad ones. I needed money. And Karen, she's got debts. Big ones." I leaned back, the vinyl booth, creaking, my mind racing. "Debts?" I asked. Greg nodded, looking like a kid caught stealing candy. "Gambling," he said, barely a whisper. "She started at the casino a couple years ago. Slots mostly. Lost more than we could cover. Russo offered a way out, help him get your properties. He'd clear her debts." I felt like I'd been kicked in the chest. Karen, gambling. My daughter, who'd always preached about responsibility, was drowning in debt and using me to climb out. I kept my face hard, didn't let Greg see the hurt. "How much does she owe?" I asked. He hesitated. 50 grand, give or take. I whistled low, not because I was impressed, but because it explained everything. Her desperation, the triplex claim, the incompetence stunt. She wasn't just greedy, she was cornered. Why my properties? I pressed. Greg shifted, his knee bouncing again. Russo knows you've got a portfolio, Tom. He's been watching you for years, ever since you bought that duplex. He thinks you're sitting on a gold mine, and he wants it cheap. My blood ran cold. Years? How did Russo know about my empire when I'd kept it so quiet? I thought of Linda's letter again, the mysterious lien on the duplex. Was Russo connected to her too? I filed that away, focusing on Greg. You've got one chance to come clean, I said. Everything Russo's plan, Karen's role, all of it. Or I turn the footage over, Greg begged, his voice cracking. Please, Tom, don't go to the cops. I'll tell you everything. Just don't tell Karen I talked. He spilled it all. Russo's scheme to lowball elderly owners, using Greg as a front to get close to me. Karen's role was smaller. She'd filed the triplex claim thinking it was a quick grab, not knowing Russo's bigger plan to take all my properties. But she'd lied about my mental state, spread the rumors at church, all to weaken my position. Greg swore she didn't know about the break-in, that it was his idea to speed things up. I didn't believe him, not fully, but I let him think I did. Get out, I said, pointing to the door. And tell Russo I'm not selling. Not now, not ever. He scrambled out, leaving his coffee untouched. I drove home, the diner's neon sign fading in my rear view. Karen's gambling debt was a shock, but it fit her anger, her desperation, the way she'd turned on me. I wanted to hate her, but part of me ached for the little girl who'd drawn me those crayon cards. I locked the front door, checked the camera footage again, and burned a copy to a USB drive for Ed. Greg was scared, but scared people talk, and I wasn't sure who he'd run to, Russo or Karen. Either way, I had to move fast. Before they regrouped, the storm was here, and I was standing right in its path. I sat on the edge of my bed that night, the USB drive with Greg's break-in footage burning a hole in my pocket. The house was quiet, save for the faint hum of the fridge and the occasional creak of the floorboards settling. I hadn't slept properly in days, my mind tangled with Karen's gambling debts, Greg's betrayal, Russo's scheme, and those cryptic letters from Linda. Greg's confession at the diner had cracked things open, but it also left me hollow. My daughter, drowning in $50,000 of casino debt, had turned on me to save herself. I wanted to confront her, lay it all bare, but I needed to do it right on my turf, with proof she couldn't dodge. So I called a family meeting, not just for Karen and Greg, but for Emma and Jake too. If this was going to end, it was going to end with the truth. I set it for Sunday afternoon, right after church, knowing Karen wouldn't dare skip it with the neighbors watching. I spent the morning prepping, pulling every deed, lease, and bank statement from my safe, spreading them across my dining table like a war map. Ed had sent over the investigator's report on Russo, plus a bombshell, the lien, on the Elm Street duplex, was tied to a shell company Russo had used in the 90 seconds. It wasn't Linda's name on it, but the timing right after she left made me wonder if she'd been tangled up with him somehow. I pushed that thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. I wasn't just going to defend my empire. I was going to show Karen exactly who she was trying to rob. They arrived at 2 p.m., Karen's SUV, crunching into my driveway. Emma and Jake bounded in first, hugging me like always, their innocence a sharp pang in my chest. Karen followed, her face tight, lips pursed like she'd sucked a lemon. Greg trailed behind, eyes on the floor, still spooked from our diner showdown. I'd invited Patty, my sister-in-law too. As a witness, she'd always been fair, even if she gossiped too much. We sat around my wobbly dining table, the same one where Karen had called me worthless 2 Thanksgivings ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. I didn't waste time. Karen, Greg, I said, my voice steady. You've been trying to take what's mine. Let's get it all out. Karen's eyes narrowed, but I didn't give her a chance to interrupt. I slid the stack of deeds across the table, 6 properties, all paid off, titled in my name. Then the bank statements, showing $12,000 a month in rental income, plus savings she'd never dreamed of. Her jaw dropped, just for a second, before she caught herself. "What is this?" she snapped, but her voice shook. Greg stared at the papers, his face pale, like he was seeing his whole plan crumble. "This," I said, tapping the pile, "is what I've built. While you were calling me worthless, I was buying properties, fixing them up, making a life. And you," I pointed at Karen, "you tried to steal it. The triplex claim, the incompetence filing, the lies at church. I know about your gambling debts, Karen, 50 grand. You thought you could sell me out to Russo to cover it." Emma gasped, her eyes wide, looking at her mom like she was a stranger. Jake clutched his sister's hand, confused. Karen's face went red, then white. "That's not true," she stammered. But Greg cut in, his voice desperate. "Karen, he's got me on camera, breaking into his shed. It's over." The room went still. Patty's mouth fell open, and Emma whispered, "Dad?" Karen turned on Greg, her voice venomous. "You did what?" But I wasn't done. I played the security footage on my laptop. Greg's shadowy figure prying open my shed, papers in hand. Karen's eyes filled with tears, but I didn't soften. "You spread lies about my mental state," I said. "You filed fake claims on my property. You thought I was nothing, but I'm the one who's been holding this family together." I turned to Emma and Jake, softening my tone. "Kids, I'm sorry you had to see this, but your mom and dad, they've been trying to take what's mine, what I planned to pass to you someday." Emma stood, tears streaming, and hugged me. "We didn't know, Grandpa," she said. Jake followed, clinging to my side, calling me Landlord, like it was a badge of honor. Karen broke down, sobbing into her hands. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she said. "Mom, your ex, she told me you failed us, that you lost everything. I was angry, Dad. And the debts, I didn't know what else to do." My heart stopped. "Linda again. When did you talk to her?" I asked, my voice sharp. Karen hesitated, then admitted. "A few years ago, she found me online, said she'd been watching us. She said you were a loser, always would be." I leaned back, the room spinning. Linda, feeding Karen lies, poisoning her against me. It wasn't an excuse, but it explained the depth of her resentment. I sent Patty and the kids to the kitchen, told Greg to wait outside. Alone with Karen, I looked at her, not my little girl, but a stranger who'd tried to destroy me. "You made your choice," I said. "I love you, but I don't trust you. Not anymore." She cried harder, but I didn't budge. Emma and Jake came back, promising to visit, siding with me over their parents. As they left, Karen's sobs echoed in my driveway, but I closed the door. I sat in my rocking chair, the house dark, the weight of the truth heavier than I'd expected. I'd won, but at what cost? And Linda's still out there, still pulling strings. I wasn't done digging yet. I woke up the next morning with a headache that felt like a hammer on my skull. The kind that comes from too little sleep and too much truth. The family meeting had left me raw, Karen's sobs still echoing in my ears. Emma and Jake's hugs the only thing keeping me from falling apart. I'd shown my hand, laid out my empire, 6 properties, years of work, proof I wasn't the worthless failure, Karen thought. But her admission about Linda, my ex-wife, contacting her, feeding her lies about me, had opened a wound I thought I'd buried decades ago. I poured my coffee, the kitchen smelling of burnt toast, and stared at the stack of papers still on my dining table. The fight with Karen and Greg was over, but Linda's shadow loomed larger than ever. I needed to protect what was mine, for good, and that meant tying up loose ends. I called Ed first thing, my voice hoarse from last night's whiskey. "I'm rewriting my will," I said. "Emma and Jake get the properties, but with conditions Karen and Greg can't touch a dime." Ed didn't argue, Just said he'd draft it up and have it ready by week's end. I spent the day at my desk, sorting through my records, making sure every deed was airtight. I set up a trust for the kids, stipulating they'd inherit when they turned 25, with a property manager to handle things until then. Karen and Greg would get nothing, not a single brick from my empire. It felt cold, cutting my own daughter out, but she'd made her choice when she tried to steal from me. I wasn't punishing her. I was protecting Emma and Jake from her mistakes. That afternoon, Karen showed up again, alone, her eyes red and puffy. She stood on my porch, clutching her purse like a lifeline. "Dad, please," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm sorry. I was desperate. Stupid. The gambling, I'm getting help. Don't shut me out." I leaned against the doorframe, my heart torn. Part of me wanted to believe her, to see the little girl who'd drawn me those crayon cards. But the other part, the part that had caught Greg in my shed, heard her lies in court, knew better. "Karen," I said, my voice flat, "you tried to take everything from me. You spread lies, worked with Russo. I can't trust you anymore." She cried, begging, promising to change. But I'd heard it before. I closed the door, not slamming it, just firm, and stood there until her car pulled away. It hurt like hell, but I'd spent too many years sacrificing for her to let her ruin me now. Later that evening, Ed called with a bombshell that nearly knocked me over. "Tom, I traced that lien on the Elm Street duplex," he said. "It's tied to a woman named Linda Marie Carter, your ex-wife. She's alive, living in Cleveland, less than an hour away. Been there for years, using her maiden name." I sat down hard in my rocking chair, the phone shaking in my hand. Linda, alive, nearby, after 30 years of silence. Her letters about debts and watching from a distance suddenly made sense. She hadn't just left. She'd been close, maybe manipulating Karen, maybe even tied to Russo's schemes. "You sure it's her?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Ed grunted. "As sure as I can be without a DNA test. Want me to dig deeper?" I told him yes, but my head was spinning. Linda, alive. Had she been pulling strings, feeding Karen's resentment, maybe even pointing Russo at my properties? I dug out her letters again, rereading them under the dim glow of my desk lamp. The talk of debts, her apology, the cryptic line about making it right. Had she been working with Russo back then, using the duplex to clear her own slate? The lien suggested she'd had some claim on the property before I bought it at auction, but how? I'd thought it was a clean foreclosure. Now I wasn't sure. I wrote down her Cleveland address from Ed's report, my hand shaking. Part of me wanted to drive there, bang on her door, demand answers. Why'd she leave? Why'd she lie to Karen? Was she behind Russo's interest in my empire? But another part, the tired, scarred part, knew confronting her might break me. I'd spent 30 years rebuilding without her. Did I really need her truth now? I decided to focus on Emma and Jake. They deserved a future free of their parents' mess. I called them the next day, invited them over for burgers. They showed up, bikes wobbling into my driveway, and we sat in the backyard, the same string lights flickering from the barbecue months ago. I told them about the trust, not the details, just that I was setting things up for them. "You're my landlord legacy," I said, half joking, and Jake grinned, calling me Landlord Grandpa. Emma hugged me, whispering, "We love you, Grandpa." "We're sorry about Mom." I hugged them back, my throat tight. They were my win, the only one that mattered. As they rode off, I sat on my porch, the evening cool, the neighbor's dog barking in the distance. Linda was out there, a ghost turned real, and I had her address. I could confront her, dig up the past, but what would it change? Karen was gone, Greg was done, and my empire was safe for now. I pulled out a pen, started a letter to Linda, just to see if I could. "You left us," I wrote. "You lied to our daughter. I don't know what you wanted, but I built something without you. I didn't finish it, just folded it and tucked it away. Maybe I'd send it, maybe not. For now, I had my grandkids, my properties, and a fight. I'd won, at least for today. The letter to Linda sat unfinished on my kitchen counter, next to a cold mug of Folgers and a stack of unopened bills I'd finally pulled from the mailbox. I hadn't decided whether to send it, or if I even wanted to hear her voice after 30 years of silence. The Akron air was sharp now, late fall settling in, and my backyard looked barren under the flickering string lights I hadn't bothered to take down. I'd won the fight against Karen and Greg, secured my properties for Emma and Jake, but the victory felt hollow, like biting into an apple and finding it rotten. My daughter was gone, maybe for good, and Linda's shadow alive in Cleveland hung over me like a storm that wouldn't break. I spent the next few days tying up loose ends. Ed finalized the trust for the kids. 6 properties locked in for them when they hit 25, with a property manager to keep things running smooth. I sold the triplex, the one Karen had tried to claim, for $450,000, 3 times Russo's lowball offer. The cash paid off a stack of medical bills from a knee surgery I'd been dodging, plus enough to bolster my retirement account. I sat in my rocking chair, signing the sale papers, the TV humming with some game show I didn't care about, and felt a weight lift. Not joy, just relief. The triplex was a battleground, and letting it go felt like shedding a scar. But every time I looked at my safe, Linda's letters inside, I wondered what I'd lost that no sale could fix. Emma and Jake started coming by more, their bikes a regular sight in my driveway. They'd help with small chores, raking leaves, checking mailboxes at the rentals, calling me Landlord Grandpa with grins that made my chest ache. One Saturday, Emma brought over a shoebox of old photos she'd found in their attic, the same place she'd gotten that duplex picture. We sat at my dining table, flipping through faded snapshots, me and Karen at the county fair, her on my shoulders, Linda smiling at a barbecue before she left. Emma paused at one of me outside the duplex, same as before, but this time I noticed something, a woman in the background, half out of frame, her face blurry, but familiar. "Who's that?" Emma asked, squinting. I didn't answer, my throat tight. It looked like Linda, but it couldn't be. The photo was from '02, years after she'd gone. Or so I thought. I changed the subject, made them hot chocolate, but my mind was on that blurry figure. Was Linda really there when I bought the duplex? Had she been closer than I knew, tied to Russo or the lien Ed found? I called him later, asked him to double-check her Cleveland address, see if she'd ever crossed paths with Russo. "Tom, you sure you want to open this can of worms?" Ed asked, his voice gruff. "I'm not sure of anything," I admitted. "Just find out." He promised to dig, but I could hear the doubt in his tone. I didn't blame him. Chasing a ghost felt like chasing my own tail. Karen hadn't called since our last fight, and I didn't expect her to. Patty, my sister-in-law, stopped by with a casserole and some gossip. Karen was in a gambling recovery program, but Greg had left town, maybe running from Russo or his own shame. I nodded, stirring the cold coffee I hadn't touched, and felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, just a dull ache where my daughter used to be. Patty hugged me before she left, saying, "You did right by the kids, Tom. That's what matters." I wanted to believe her, but as I locked the door, the house felt emptier than ever. That evening, I sat on my porch, the squeaky rocking chair swaying under me, watching the sunset paint the sky orange over the neighbor's roof. The dog down the street was barking, same as always, and the air smelled of burning leaves. I pulled out the half-written letter to Linda, reread my angry scrawl. "You left us. You lied to our daughter." I added a line, "If you're out there, stay away. We test of our right with you left. Don't need you." I folded it, slipped it into an envelope, and addressed it to the Cleveland house Ed had found. I walked to the mailbox, the envelope heavy in my hand, and stood there, the flag up, the letter teetering on the edge of being sent. I didn't open the box. I couldn't. Not yet. I went back inside, the TV flickering with static, and looked at the photos Emma had left. Me, Karen, the life we'd had before it all broke. I'd won, my empire was safe. My grandkids were mine. Russo was out of the picture. But the cost was a daughter I'd lost, a wife I'd never really known, and a truth I wasn't sure I wanted. I sat in my chair, the house creaking around me, and let the sunset fade. The letter stayed in my pocket, unanswered, like so much of my life. I'd built something, sure, but some scars don't heal, no matter how many deeds you hold.